Week 15, tough calls. Justin Fields against the Eagles. And the last two times we saw Fields, he scored 24.6 fantasy points at the Falcons and then 19.3 fantasy points against the Packers. But he had one of his better passing games against the Packers. But he's our first tough call. Heath, where do you have Justin Fields?
I think he came out at 11 or 12 at quarterback in the projections. I boosted him up to 9 or 10 in the rankings. It is a tough call, but there has not been a quarterback who has scored 20 fantasy points against the Eagles this year with their passing. The one guy who has scored 20 fantasy points against the Eagles was Daniel Jones, and he did it with a rushing touchdown. Obviously, you would expect a rushing touchdown for Justin Fields, but I do think that there is significant risk that he could just be a 16-point outing. He could run for 80 yards and maybe one touchdown, not get into the end zone as a passer, and throw another interception or two.
How many quarterbacks this week do not carry significant risk? And you could be a wise ass and say, oh, every quarterback has significant risk. But being real, like everybody's starting Hurts, Mahomes, Herbert, Josh Allen, and Dak. I think everybody's going to start Joe Burrow too. Yeah, I think Dak against Jacksonville.
I just based on the questions and the comments I get every week, I think a lot of people have Dak anxiety. They don't trust him.
Well, I would start him ahead of Justin Fields. And I would consider him one of those guys that you start and you don't look back. Because I think the game against Jacksonville will be favorable for Dak Prescott. I think every other quarterback has a question mark, and that includes Justin Fields, but not every quarterback has the rushing upside that Justin Fields has. So I have him 8th. I think I'm going to keep him at 8. I like him better than Tua at Buffalo. Might be snowing in Buffalo, and Tua was a mess last week. It's hard to imagine he'll put it all together against a team as sharp as Buffalo.
Is the snow thing because Tua's like not experienced cold weather very much in Miami? The Dolphins play in Miami because snow without wind is good for offenses.
Let's see what the forecast exactly is.
Slippery fields are good for offenses because the offense knows where they're going and the defense doesn't.
So Jamie said the same thing. I think that's kind of like what happens to the Vegas total when you see there's heavy snow?
Well, heavy snow is a different thing. I think
agree.
We're expecting.
No, you're right. If it's right, so
any bad weather is bad for scoring. I think.
Yeah. I don't. Forecast Saturday night: snow low near 25, winds 10 to 15 miles an hour, 80% chance of snow, 1 to 3 inches. If the wind stays at 10 to 15 miles an hour, then this really isn't that bad of a forecast.
I mean, maybe it's that Tua doesn't like cold weather, and like that's possible. I don't like cold weather.
I mean, we've opined about that with Derek Carr before.
I think I don't know if you've done it before, but it could be the first time that he's playing in that type of environment, and it's never easy. And obviously the Bills are
good, right? They've got a hell of a pass rush that's going to come after.
So Fields over Tua for you. I think you said you have him 8th. I'm sorry, Heath. Where'd you have Tua?
9.
I'm sorry, not Tua. Fields. 9. Okay. All right. Well, next up is Dak Prescott. And
okay.
Yeah. David, definitely the high guy on him. Looking at the rankings, Jamie and Heath would say Dak Prescott might be a tough call here. Interceptions are a bit of a problem. He's been pretty good since coming back, but last week was obviously a major disappointment, 15.7 fantasy points. The Jaguars are a good matchup. They allow the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So, Dave, why are you so confident in Dak Prescott?
The matchup is the biggest thing. They've given up at least 21 fantasy points to 7 of the past 8 quarterbacks. Matt Ryan and Daniel Jones each had 30 points against them. Goff had 25 points against them. I don't think that their pass defense is anything dominant, and I think Jacksonville will put up points of their own, and that'll mean that Dak will have to do things through the air. So I think that he's safe for like that 22, 23 fantasy point total with upside to get as high as 30. I think he could throw 3 touchdowns.
Go ahead, Heath.
Yeah, I think he's a low-end number 1 quarterback. I was looking up Tua's performance in cold weather games. This is not his first. He played at Buffalo on January 3rd when the high was 35 degrees that day. Back in his rookie year, threw for 361 yards.
Oh, that was against their
was that a week 18 game?
17. They played their starters for half the game.
Okay, but obviously a game where the starters sat for a while.
Yeah, I remember that because Allen and Diggs went. Was it Diggs that year? Yeah, right? And they went crazy in one half in that game. But it's good to know. It's good to know. It's better than it being his first. It's a very informative show today. All right, low end number one quarterback for Heath. Would you guys start Dak or Lawrence?
Lawrence.
I have Dak higher.
I think one of the things that's interesting about that game is the pass attempts, because Dak's not doing a lot of that. But Dave, you just said you think that the Jaguars are going to score points. I don't know if we're not giving the Cowboys defense enough credit, or if we just think it's not as good right now. But they are basically the second best defense in football, depending on the measure. I think they've given up like the second fewest points, the fewest yards per game. They have the second most sacks in the NFL. I think they're one behind the Eagles. We don't view them maybe as a really tough defense. I'm not sure, but we think the Jaguars are just going to go up and down the field and get a shootout here?
I don't think it'll be like that. I don't see it being a shootout, but I see them getting in the neighborhood of like 20 to 24 points. I think Trevor will be okay. He's going to have some turnovers along the way. That's why I don't have him ranked higher than Dak.
When I put together this segment, I put David Montgomery in as a tough call going up against the Eagles. And I said, I bet Heath has David Montgomery ranked a lot higher than Dave and Jamie. And bam, damn night. He does have David Montgomery in his top 10. Maybe those are just the projections and not updated rankings, or maybe you just really like David Montgomery. I think he's a tough call. Actually, I think he's a sit. But what do you well, I don't think he's a sit. I think he's a guy I'd like to sit. But what do you think about David Montgomery, Heath?
I think he's not that far from James Conner. A workhorse running back who's going to get 20 touches and catch 3 or 4 passes. He's been remarkably efficient in the passing game this year. The running game, he's been good enough at 4 yards per carry. I just like when you're comparing him to Saquon Barkley or Alvin Kamara, I would rather start Montgomery.
How do you compare him to Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry?
Not Derrick Henry. Saquon Barkley or Alvin Kamara.
No, I'm asking a fresh question. How do you compare Montgomery to Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry?
Oh, I think Derrick Henry might be the best running back this week. I think you've got him he's definitely ahead.
Yeah, sure. But talent-wise, opportunity-wise,
He's not as good as Derrick Henry, obviously.
No.
He's probably as good as what Saquon Barkley is right now, which is the shell of himself.
Okay, so those are the 2 running backs that the Eagles have played in the last 2 weeks. Jordan Davis has been back helping out on running downs.
Right.
Philadelphia, in those past 2 games, have allowed 3 yards per carry to those teams, no touchdowns, 6.9 yards per catch. This is a tough matchup for David Montgomery. I fully expect him to get the workload that you're talking about. You're going to need him to score, and you're going to need him to do a lot in the passing game in order for him to be very good for fantasy. I'm on board with him as a number 2. I think he's a must start as a number 2 fantasy running back, given how many other running backs that there are major question marks about. I'll start him over Nick Chubb, for example. To me, that's a no-brainer.
Well, I do have to push back on the touches thing because the Eagles do not see a lot of running back carries. When they have had Jordan Davis in their lineup, there has been one running back who's had more than 15 carries, I believe. Of more than 14 carries. One running back all year when Jordan Davis has played, and that was week 1, DeAndre Swift. Obviously, they score a bunch of points. They take you out of your game script, and you can't really run on them. They allow 3.46 yards per carry with Jordan Davis on the field. So if you get only 13 or so carries from David Montgomery, I think it's going to be a pretty miserable fantasy game. I think there's significant downside here, guys.
Well, I mean, he's had 14 carries in each of his last 2 games.
Yeah, I can't rely on the 3 to 4 catches necessarily. That's nice. It's happened, but it's been about half his games. Half his games he's had, 0 to 1 catch, I think.
Well, we generally lean a little bit more heavily on what's happened recently, and it's happened in each of his last 3 games.
Yeah, and when you look at the games that they've lost by 10 or more points, you're usually talking about 2 to 3 catches. So if we give him 3 catches, and 14 carries, I mean, those 14 carries could go for 35 yards. It wouldn't shock me, based on how well he runs the ball and how well the Eagles defend the run. I don't know, man. You got him in your top 10. That's a lot of confidence.
There's absolutely zero surprise to anyone who's listened to the last 3 years of this podcast that you think David Montgomery is going to be awful, and I think he's going to be great.
How is he going to be good against the Eagles? How is he going to be efficient against the Eagles? I feel pretty good about the YPC. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I don't
confident
play
like
it. I did not make the playoffs in any of my YPC leagues. Maybe I just wasn't considering
It's
that.
still important. You're not going to get a good rushing performance.
If you figure 3.5 yards per carry, then you're what, at 50 yards?
I'm going to go under that because that's what they allow with Jordan Davis on the field, and he's not a good running back. So
I totally disagree that he's not a good running back.
He's not an efficient running back. He never has been. He's been an efficient running back for 5 games in his career. All right, he's going to average 3.1 yards per carry or less. Book it. It is a guarantee, and if he's 3.3, I'm taking credit for being close.
Yeah, I fully expect that. That sounds exactly right.
All right, let's skip around here. I have too many names. You want to talk about Bam Knight? Because Dave, you're lower on him than Heath is. It's just the same situation here. It's a really tough matchup. I know you guys talked about him earlier, but Dave, Bam Knight or David Montgomery?
In PPR, I will go with. I think I've got Knight higher in PPR, but it's close.
But you have them both as low end guys, right?
They're like middle of the pack, number 2 running backs.
Okay,
I've got him 17th. I can't help but think about what we've gotten out of Bam Knight over his past 3 games. Is it now? Where it's been 100 total yards, or not? It's not 100 total yards in every game, but double-digit fantasy points with a couple of catches on top. Definitely has an opportunity to score. Detroit's run defense is great. You mentioned it. 3.4 yards per carry in their past 6. 2 rushing touchdowns to running backs in their past 6. No running back is more than 9 PPR points against them. Wild stuff. Can Bam Knight be the one to break that? I think this is another game that'll be fairly high scoring. I like Mike White this week. And I also think the Jets are kind of smart about their offense, and maybe they use Zonovan a little bit more in the passing game. So I'm good with Knight as a start. It's certainly in the same vein as David Montgomery.
Yeah, he's in the same vein as Montgomery for Heath too, but that's a higher vein.
I think this probably connects to Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara. Like those are 2 guys who Dave has ahead of these 2 guys, and I have behind these 2 guys. But they're all, like we were talking about, how many running backs don't have any risk, or how many quarterbacks. Well, there's like 8 running backs that don't have any risk. Like Saquon Barkley played 30% of the snaps last week. I don't even know if he's okay.
Yeah, the score had something to do with that, but so did the injury for sure. Yeah, he's also a tough call. Name the 8 running backs that have.
No, I was just being goofy.
But no, I mean there probably are like 9. McCaffrey.
Is Miles Sanders one?
I don't.
Is he one of the 9?
I don't think Miles Sanders is ever safe.
Okay, is Ezekiel Elliott safe?
I have Jacobs, McCaffrey, Henry, Eckler, James Conner, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard.
Okay. Tony Pollard's safe. That's awesome.
See, Pollard's got 10 fewer carries than Zeke in his last 2 games. He's amazing. Mm-hmm. But I think I'd start Miles Sanders over every running back we've talked about. I don't know about Kamara, but I'd start him over Montgomery. I'd start him over Knight. I'd start him over Barkley. I don't know about Chubb. I mean, I like Chubb, but Sanders is going to crush he does pretty well against these bad run defenses. Look what he did against the Texans, the Giants. Now he's facing the Bears. They can't stop the run.
They give him opportunities in those games too.
Yeah,
which is important, obviously.
Ooh, this is going to be a fun week. We're going to have a lot of good questions this week. All right, let's do some wide receivers here. Amari Cooper. He's back at home. Hooray. But he's facing the Ravens. How do we feel about Amari Cooper? Heath, start or sit?
I know the home road thing we've talked a lot about this year, but mostly I feel about Amari Cooper like I have for almost his entire career. He's a number 2 wide receiver that has the upside every week to finish as a top 5 guy and has the floor every week of Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's just been that kind of guy. And those are the guys I'm just going to start this week because I want the upside. He's a number 2 wide receiver.
Dave, you agree? Or is Cooper a tough call?
No, he's a tough call, but I agree with where Heath's coming out on him. One of the problems is his quarterback, and it's Deshaun Watson. And how much better was he last week than the week before? What I can tell you is that he was on target much more in week 14 than he was in week 13. That's a positive.
He looked
The
like a
home
junior
the
varsity
home road
quarterback.
thing is completely mystifying to me. Like
Yeah.
the fact that it's actually happening. Like maybe we should just ignore all other elements of analysis and just say, okay, he's playing at home, so he must be great. And so it's a tough matchup. I think Baltimore's defense is going to be tough on Cleveland overall, but I think you still got to start him because you know that he can go off for 700 and a touch.
Would you start Zay Jones over Amari Cooper?
No.
Full PPR, I would.
Oh, wow.
Wow. You're all the way back in on Zay Jones.
Double-digit targets in 3 of his last 4 games, right?
Yep. And I mean, just one drop pass away from double-digit PPR points in each of his past 4 games.
Would you start Amari Cooper or Gabe Davis?
Cooper.
Agreed.
I think they're kind of the same guy. They're just on the opposite sides of 24. Like Cooper, I think is 26, and Cooper's right around 20, and Gabe's right around 26.
But I think scoring system matters here because full PPR is going to give a very obvious lead to Cooper because he gets way more targets generally than Gabe Davis.
One guy I think I'm going to be telling people to start, I hope you guys agree with me, is Michael Pittman. Minnesota's just the absolute best matchup. Would you start Pittman over Cooper?
It's not in non-PPR. In full PPR, I think it's really close, but I think I'm going to take Cooper.
I've got Cooper over Pittman, but I could see it. It's close enough. Like they're both top 20 for me.
Okay.
How come Pittman doesn't get more work in the red zone?
Do they get to the red zone?
How many
Honestly,
passes have they thrown in the red zone?
As of a couple of weeks ago, they were top 10 in red zone pass attempts. I can look again.
Oh, wow.
Give me a minute to look it up.
No, I don't know. Don't have an answer for that. Last tough call. Let's just do this one quickly here. Christian Watson against the Rams. He has had 6 to 8 targets in 4 straight games. How about all of the wide receivers who have had 6 to 8 targets against the Rams? There have been 9 of them. 5 of those 9 had pretty games, 8.6 to 12.3 fantasy points in PPR. 4 of those 9 had over 20 fantasy points. So all over the place in terms of the receivers who have had 6 to 8 targets against the Rams. Watson's on fire, 4 straight games with a touchdown. Do you view him the same way you view Cooper or Gabe Davis?
Yeah. He's right in the middle of them.
Not for me. He's ahead.
I think he is Gabe Davis without the bad stretch yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming. If you live in that 6 to 8 target range and have an ADOT profile like he does, and he's had a couple of shorter things. The rushing has certainly helped, but I still think he has huge bust potential on a weekly basis. Just the boom potential is huge too.
That's why you have to start him.
Yeah.
Rodgers also said this week that his thumb is feeling way better. So maybe he'll be even better as a passer, and this has become the guy that he loves connecting with for big plays.
Does he have more targets than Alan Lazard over the last 3 or 4 games?
It can be looked up.
I think it's pretty close because Lazard had 4 against the Cowboys, then he had 11 against the Titans. I don't quite remember the other 2 games, Philadelphia. And I guess
so in his last 5, it was 5 weeks ago that Watson really emerged, right? Week 9?
4.
It was 4? Okay, so then
The Dallas game.
Okay. Colts have 51 red zone pass attempts this year. That's a little worse than league average. If we go inside the 10, they're 15th, 26 inside the 10 snaps. So they're basically league average in both of those stats, and still 7 red zone targets on the year for Michael Pittman.
That's bad.